I'm now 28 years old, and I have a twin brother, a fact that shaped my entire childhood in ways I never could have imagined. Growing up, my brother and I were treated completely differently by our parents, creating a divide that would only deepen with time. For reasons I still can't comprehend, my parents were convinced that my brother was destined for greatness, while they labeled me as the problem child. All I wanted was to enjoy sports and make friends, rather than spending every waking moment studying. Was that really so wrong? The constant comparisons between us cut deep into my self-esteem, leaving wounds that would take years to heal. As a young girl, I had to watch my brother host elaborate birthday parties with his friends, while I was treated like a second-class citizen in my own home. While he could have sleepovers whenever he wanted, I wasn't even allowed to invite friends over, a restriction that felt like a prison sentence at that age. To be honest, I hated every moment of my childhood, except for the precious times when my grandmother visited. My grandmother was my guardian angel, the only one in the family who truly saw me and cared about my happiness. Every time she visited, she would secretly bring me my favorite chocolates and slip me some pocket money, small gestures that meant the world to me. As time went on, my parents' favoritism toward my brother evolved into something darker, emotional abuse directed at me. They would openly mock my grades and belittle my interests, making me feel like I could never measure up to their impossible standards of perfection. Despite being naturally athletic, I was forbidden from participating in any extracurricular activities because they wanted me to focus on academics like my brother. The frustration and helplessness I felt as a child still echoes in my memories today. Then came the incident, in my sophomore year of high school, that would change everything. I was punished severely for having Snapchat on my phone, something every teenager had at the time. I had only downloaded the app to stay connected with my friends, just like any normal teenager would do. But in my parents' eyes, this simple act of trying to maintain friendships was treated as a major crime, a betrayal of their trust. Their reaction was explosive. They threw things around my room and removed my door from its hinges, declaring that I had no right to privacy while living under their roof. Living under that same roof, my twin brother didn't offer support. Instead, he made my life even more unbearable. The toxic environment created by my parents' unfair treatment gave him the perfect opportunity to manipulate situations to his advantage. He developed a pattern of lying about me, falsely accusing me of things I never did, while somehow always managing to escape consequences himself. If anything went missing, he would blame me, and our parents, already predisposed to think the worst of me, would believe his lies without question. He took pleasure in humiliating me in front of my friends at school, mocking my appearance and doing everything he could to tear me down. Despite his efforts, I managed to maintain many friendships at school, as I was naturally outgoing and easy to get along with. My brother struggled socially, and his discomfort with his own introversion turned into resentment toward my ability to connect with others. This jealousy reached its peak on our 14th birthday, when none of his friends showed up to his party. While I don't know why his friends didn't come, my friends took me out for ice cream, making it a wonderful day for me. This contrast only fueled his anger, leading him to spread malicious rumors about me at school, painting me as a spoiled brat. Because our parents favored him, he started telling everyone that I was physically abusing him at home, a complete fabrication that I knew nothing about. To create evidence for his lies, he began the disturbing practice of inflicting injuries on himself, deliberately creating black eyes and bruises on his shoulders. The next day, he would proudly display these self-inflicted wounds at school as a proof of my alleged violence. When our parents questioned the injuries, he spun elaborate tales of abuse. The rumors spread like wildfire, and soon even my closest friends began to look at me with suspicion. At first, the changes were subtle, friends in the hallway becoming distant, fewer invitations to group activities. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, everyone began treating me like I was violent, hesitating to associate with the spoiled girl who had supposedly turned abusive. One day, I finally gathered the courage to ask my former best friend why our relationship had changed so drastically. Her revelation shook me to my core. My brother had been spreading vicious rumors about me, accusing me of things I had never done. The shock of her words hit me like a physical blow, leaving me feeling as if the ground beneath my feet had suddenly disappeared. The betrayal of knowing my own twin brother, the person I'd grown up with, had deliberately spread lies to destroy my reputation was almost too much to bear. That night, as the weight of these false accusations pressed down on me, I felt sick to my stomach, my heart heavy with an indescribable pain. After school the next day, I confronted my brother, but he chose to simply ignore me, as if I were invisible. When I begged him to stop spreading lies about me, he looked at me with cold contempt and told me I deserved to rot alone. His lies and actions had begun to terrify me, and I found myself speechless in the face of such calculated cruelty. I wanted desperately to tell our parents, but feared they would believe him over me, as they always had. The isolation was particularly painful because I had always been friendly and outgoing by nature. I watched helplessly as my brother's jealousy-fueled lies systematically destroyed relationships I had spent years building. Even the teachers began to hear the rumors, and I felt like I was living in some parallel universe where my true self had been replaced by my brother's malicious fiction. These weren't just teenage rumors anymore, they were reshaping people's entire perception of who I was. The uncomfortable whispers eventually reached the principal's ears, and my worst nightmare became reality. The principal immediately called a meeting with me, my brother, and our parents to discuss these allegations. As the principal searched for the truth, I sat there, with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I had hoped my brother would finally confess, but instead, he piled on more lies. He looked the principal straight in the eye and claimed the rumors were true, painting a picture of me as a violent person who beat him whenever our parents weren't around. I was stunned as he continued this twisted narrative, claiming my violence stemmed from anger over our parents' greater affection for him. Though it was all lies, he stuck to his story as if it were glued to him. My mother burst into tears, clutching my brother as if he were some kind of hero. My father comforted him, praising his courage for speaking up and promising nothing bad would happen to him. After that day, I tried desperately to defend myself. I pleaded with the principal that it was all fabrication, feeling like I was drowning in a sea of accusations. But my brother continued to portray me as a violent, angry person who took out her frustrations on him daily. My mother's tears wouldn't stop as she clung to my brother, looking at me with accusing eyes. It felt like fighting against a wall of people who were determined to believe my brother's fiction. The principal sternly reprimanded me, stating that the school had zero tolerance for bullying and this warranted suspension. I begged him not to suspend me, but he shook his head, saying he couldn't overlook this situation. Through my tears, I tried to explain that I had never done anything to my brother, but the principal was adamant, handing down a 10-day suspension as an example to other students. The shock hit me hard, and I began to cry even more intensely. I pleaded for reconsideration, but my parents, angry and embarrassed by the situation, dragged me out of the principal's office. I didn't want to leave, I wanted to stay and make them understand my side, but they weren't interested in listening. With my heart heavy with frustration and humiliation, we left the school. When we got home, everything changed in an instant. My father suddenly started packing my belongings, his movements sharp with anger. I was in shock, confused, unable to comprehend what was happening. When my mother asked my father what he was doing, he shouted that he couldn't let me live under the same roof as my brother anymore. Through my tears, I practically fell to my knees begging my brother to tell the truth, but he remained cold and unmoved by my emotional breakdown. My father continued packing, throwing my suitcase into the front hallway with a force that made me flinch. I clung to my father's legs, pleading not to be thrown out, feeling like I was living in some horrible nightmare. He declared that violent people like me had no right to live in this house, but said they would call my grandmother if she was willing to take me in. I felt my world crumbling beneath my feet, standing frozen among my scattered belongings in the entryway. Then my grandmother appeared, like an angel in the midst of chaos, helping to gather all my belongings and load them into her car. After making sure I was securely buckled in, she marched up to my parents' front door with determination in every step. When my father answered the doorbell, my grandmother launched into a fierce condemnation of how they had treated me. She took a firm stance, warning them that if they tried to approach or contact me, she would report them to the police and Child Protective Services. She even pointed out that their treatment of me could land my father in jail. When my mother tried to deflect blame onto me, my grandmother stood her ground, unwavering. It was the first time in my life I had witnessed my grandmother's true strength. Unlike my parents, she stood up to them without fear, choosing to believe in me when no one else would. Finally, we left, driving away from the only home I had ever known. The pain I felt in that moment defies description. Words simply cannot capture its depth. I remember lying in bed, crying endlessly, unable to eat despite my grandmother's gentle encouragement. When I told my grandmother everything my brother had done, she was shocked but supportive. She assured me she believed my story, and I felt relief knowing I had at least one person on my side. When my 10-day suspension ended, returning to school felt like walking into a lion's den. Walking down familiar hallways, my classmates' expressions told me everything I needed to know. The air was thick with judgment, whispers, sidelong glances, and the weight of false accusations. Meanwhile, my brother openly ignored me, acting as if I didn't exist. He had befriended people who believed his story and saw him as my victim. No matter how hard I tried to explain my side of the story, no one would listen. I became an outcast with an undeserved label that followed me like a shadow. In classrooms, the cafeteria, and hallways, every pair of eyes that met mine held contempt and distrust. I became a solitary figure, keeping my head down during classes, eating lunch alone, and heading straight home afterward. I had no friends left, and most people acted as if I were invisible. During this time, my parents never once called to check on me. My grandmother constantly reminded me that none of this was my fault, assuring me that things would get better someday. I graduated high school with good grades, eagerly anticipating college as my chance for a better life. At university, I experienced true freedom for the first time. No one was watching over my shoulder, comparing my grades, or trying to compete with me. I met new people and developed friendships with those who shared similar perspectives. Despite the emotional and physical scars left by years of family and classmate abuse, I chose to leave the past behind and focus on making the most of this new experience. During college, I discovered my talent for writing. I had always dreamed of becoming a writer, but I'd given up on that dream, unsure if it could provide a stable living. Then, I decided to try freelance writing to earn some extra money while in college. I registered on several freelance platforms and managed to secure work with quality clients. Throughout college, I slowly built my portfolio, piece by piece. I continued this side work, never having to ask my parents for a single penny. After graduation, I realized I could make content writing my full-time career instead of taking a corporate job. Thanks to building long-term relationships with multiple clients and participating in various projects, my career flourished. Building a legitimate freelance career not only gave me financial independence, but also the opportunity to travel the world as a digital nomad. The travel helped heal my past wounds, though it wasn't always easy. I saved as much as I could and took a chance on myself. I've seen much of the world over the years, though there are still many places left to explore. During this time, my grandmother was the only person I recognized as family, and I loved her deeply. When I moved away, she was sad but understood my need for independence. Despite my busy schedule, I made sure to spend as much time with her as possible. I would visit on weekends, sharing meals and sitting on her porch, talking about childhood memories and recent events. Recently, I completed one of the most significant projects of my career. While I can't name the brand, I had the opportunity to write their blog posts and product descriptions. After completing the project, I asked the team I worked with to leave positive reviews on my website, which they gladly did. Knowing this brand work was a significant achievement, I posted screenshots of the reviews on Instagram. As expected, many content writers celebrated my professional success and shared my story. Soon, I started receiving messages from strangers asking for help with their websites. Some relatives noticed this too and reached out to congratulate me. Finally, the dean of my university contacted me, having seen my success, asking me to give a lecture to students about careers. I agreed to speak about building a career as a content writer. Though nervous about public speaking, I took the leap. Standing before those eager students, sharing my experiences and ideas, I felt life had come full circle. In my lecture, I talked about the hardships I'd faced and how hard I'd worked to overcome difficult days and become self-sufficient. Being able to empower others and contribute to the writing community was truly rewarding. Some of my posts went viral in Facebook groups, with people relating to my journey. It felt good to finally have my efforts recognized. Last week, I was invited to appear on a local news program to discuss the benefits of content writing and share my experiences and insights with viewers. Though slightly nervous, I was excited about the opportunity. On the show, I talked about my experiences, the importance of client reviews, and how a simple gratitude post can open doors to amazing opportunities. The chance to reach a wider audience and inspire others in the field left me feeling both humbled and excited. After the broadcast, I proudly shared clips from the TV appearance on Instagram. This is how my relatives and cousins began to learn just how well my career was going. My parents hadn't told anyone about me, so they didn't know I was working with famous brands and appearing on television. This news spread quickly through the family. The television interview eventually reached my parents' ears. A few days later, while working on another project with my phone on silent, I finished work to find 6 missed calls from my mother. After years of silence, seeing my mother's name on my phone left me truly shocked. I couldn't understand why she would call after so many years of silence. I hesitated to return the call, but when I did, she answered immediately. When I asked if everything was okay, she began offering congratulations. My father, presumably sitting beside her, joined the conversation, asking about my life and health. I answered their questions without much emotion. Everything seemed normal until they started asking about my current income. When I told them that wasn't their concern, my father replied that as family, I shouldn't be ashamed to share my income. After I assured them I was doing fine financially, my mother started talking about their recent hardships, and I grew suspicious. The conversation went something like this: "We're retired now, and we've wanted to renovate the house for years, but it's not in good shape. We don't have any savings. When we saw your success on TV, it gave us hope. Would you be willing to pay for the house renovations? After all, we're family. You shouldn't hesitate to share your income with us." Are you kidding? Why are you asking for money now after years of no contact? While I appreciate you reaching out, I can't help. Hearing this, my mother began calling me immoral, insisting I had an obligation to support family. My father added that they deserved to be taken care of as parents, and this was the least I could do. While I wanted to lash out in anger, a sudden idea struck me. Instead of arguing, I decided to teach them a lesson about thinking they could use me after years of abuse. I told my parents I would consider their request, but only under certain conditions. My father asked what they were, sounding intrigued. Without hesitation, I laid out my terms. If they wanted my help, they would have to publicly admit, in front of family and friends, that my brother was behind the malicious rumors that destroyed my reputation. I wanted them to humiliate my brother publicly, just as they had humiliated me, by believing his lies and manipulation. I wanted them to take responsibility for their actions and acknowledge the pain they had caused. Hearing these impossible conditions, my father began questioning the necessity of such a confession. My mother said it was completely unnecessary and that we could discuss this privately, without involving others. But I stood firm. This condition was non-negotiable and a prerequisite for any help they might want. As tensions rose, my father raised his voice, asserting his position as a parent and emphasizing my duty to help struggling family. My mother made one last effort, emphasizing the years they had raised me, while urging me to do the right thing. I couldn't help but feel the irony in their sudden appeal. I reminded them of the past, how they had thrown me out and that it was my grandmother, not them, who had raised me. They grew increasingly agitated, but I remained firm, telling them that if they wanted contact with me and future financial assistance, they would have to publicly acknowledge the truth and my brother would have to face the consequences of his actions. Since that conversation, my parents have been calling persistently, but I've been ignoring them. I'm starting to regret even answering that day. I wonder if I'm really wrong for not helping my parents at all. Update 1: A crazy week has passed since my last post, and the support and encouragement I've received from everyone has been heartwarming. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this situation. I'm glad everyone agrees that I shouldn't even consider helping or engaging with my parents after what I experienced. The reason I set those conditions was because I knew they would be practically impossible for them to fulfill. They love my brother too much, and even if they now realize it was all his lies, they would never make him experience what I went through. Today, after I didn't answer another attempted contact from my parents, I received a cruel message from my brother. Here's what he wrote: "Hey, sis. Long time no see. Life has been amazing without you. I heard you gave our parents some crazy ultimatum when they reached out to you. You know that's never going to happen, right? They obviously never loved you and they're never going to hurt me. I'll admit I lied about you 15 years ago, but it's been so long, stop being selfish and get over it. Besides, you're single with no kids, right? Why won't you help pay for the house repairs and renovations? Do the right thing and be a better daughter." Reading this message felt like a knife to my heart. His audacity to dismiss my suffering and the conditions I set revealed his complete lack of empathy. His attempt to manipulate me by emphasizing my single, childless status added another layer of insensitivity. The implication that I should prioritize their needs over my own happiness was not only offensive but highlighted how little he valued me. Driven by anger and a need for justice, I decided it was finally time to reveal the truth that had been hidden for far too long. I wrote an email to my parents and close relatives, sharing the painful events of my childhood and the unfair treatment I endured growing up in that house. In the email, I detailed the harsh, oppressive environment under my parents and how differently I was treated compared to my twin brother. I also addressed the malicious and completely fabricated rumors my brother spread at school, explaining how they had serious consequences and damaged my reputation. I wrote about how my parents threw me out onto the street, and how I might be dead now if it weren't for my grandmother. Finally, I asked everyone to read the message my brother had sent me, attaching screenshots where he admitted to lying about me. It was a clear confession, exposing the lies that had persisted for far too long. It's only been an hour since I sent the email, but I know chaos will erupt once my parents and brother read it. I'll report back on how the family reacts. Update 2: a month has passed, and a lot has happened. As you can imagine, my family was thrown into chaos after receiving my email. My parents faced criticism from relatives who had no idea about the extent of their favoritism and emotional abuse. Many family members reached out to me, saying they had no idea this had happened and apologizing for not being there for me. My brother and parents started sending me a flood of increasingly abusive and violent messages. As a result, I had to hire a lawyer to send them a cease and desist letter. Basically, it warned them they would face serious legal consequences if they tried to contact me again. This seemed to frighten them, and the contact stopped. My grandmother is 100% supportive of my decision to tell everyone the truth. I'm so grateful she's on my side, as she's the only person I truly consider family. Update 3: another 2 months have passed, and I'm happy to report that my life is going well. Professionally, my content writing business is thriving. I'm getting constant requests for seminars and podcast appearances, establishing myself as a respected figure in the field. I maintain a close relationship with my grandmother. Recently, I took a week off to spend quality time with her. She's developed an interest in gardening and teaches me about the various flowers and plants in her garden. These moments with her, sharing meals, having heartfelt conversations, and just enjoying each other's presence, are my most treasured memories. I'm glad my family is keeping their distance after receiving the lawyer's letter. Personally, I've started therapy so I can work on healing myself, with hope for the future. I think this will be my final update for now.